What's up, Simonics, and welcome to a new tutorial about using Ionic in a kind of different way. Because the focus of this tutorial is actually using mostly Angular and then adding Capacitor to it. Because a lot of people checking out this video are perhaps even new to this channel. So what we want to do is we want to take a regular Angular web application and add Capacitor to that project. Why? Because Capacitor allows us to build a native application for iOS, Android, even Electron from our web project's code, and also allows us to access native device functionality like camera, device information, push notification, basically everything. If you come from a traditional web background and you now want to build a mobile application from this, adding Capacitor to your Angular app is really a great idea, because you will see how easy it is and how fast we will be able to take a standard Angular application without really any big changes to it and get this on our iOS and Android device. If you want to check out the source code, link below the video as always, and also as a quick information upfront, I run the Ionic Academy online school dedicated to learning everything Ionic. So if you enjoy building mobile applications and you come from a web development background, you should definitely check it out, as you can learn to build awesome mobile applications with one code base in no time. Check it out, ionicacademy.com. Check out link below for all code. And now let's dive into this. Alright, so let's get started. I've created with the Angular CLI a blank new Angular project. Most likely you're coming to this video with an existing Angular application, so feel free to use your existing or just use the testing one. The next step is the maybe most important, as we need to install Capacitor into our project. So we're going to install first of all the Capacitor core. Capacitor core is necessary for basically everything that we want to use. So it's the first package that we need. On top of Capacitor core, we also want to add the CLI. So once this installation is done, we will also add the Capacitor CLI, which brings a few cool functionalities. Okay, that one's finished, and now we go ahead with this one, install the Capacitor CLI as a development dependency. Now, once this is done, we can start the initial connection to our native applications, because we need a few steps to set up Capacitor in our project, but those steps are really easy. If you're using Ionic, you get the Ionic CLI, which automatically does most of this, but for a new project with Angular or React or Vue, these are the first two packages that we need to install. You can find them now within your package.json as always, so you should have Capacitor Core version 3+ in the future, and also the CLI version 3. Next step is to run npx to execute a local script, npx cap init. So cap is the keyword for the Capacitor CLI, so you could also do cap-h to get help with all the commands of the Capacitor CLI. But of course, we're gonna do npx cap init. This will create a new file in your project, and it's asking for a few things. So the name of your application, like what you see in the App Store. Now you really need to get into the mindset of mobile applications. We're gonna just keep it with Angular Capacitor. Next step is the package ID. It is not super important at this point, so you could just leave it to the default, or I will select something like com-dev-dictic Angular. Basically, the package ID is a unique ID for your mobile, iOS and Android applications. Both use this bundle ID in iOS and application ID in Android, so a bit different names, but usually you need this to be a unique string in this form. Once again, you can change this later, but then you have to get a bit into the native part of your project. So perhaps use something like your company, and then the project name, which works best. As you can see, this will generate a Capacitor config in your project. So this is a nice project with typings. You can check out the interface for Capacitor config to see all the options, or you could just go somewhere inside the documentation, there it is, for the capacitor configuration. So here are all the properties that you could use in there. Go through it, give it a read if you're interested. As you can see, we got the app ID in here. We got the app name, so the first two things we added to the CLI. Then we got the web directory, which is currently set to dist, which we might have to change. And bundle web runtime is only necessary if you're using Capacitor without a bundler. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and build my Angular web application, because this will show something important, and that is the web directory right now is not set to the correct folder. With Ionic, this usually works if you're inside an Angular project or a different framework like React. You should make sure that this path is exactly to the output of your application. So in my case, my application is called Angular Capacitor, and my output folder will likely be inside dist Angular Capacitor. As we can see, there's another subfolder. So it's not just this folder, it's really this specific subfolder. Now we've enabled Capacitor, we've added it to our project. The next step now is to add the native platforms. See, you have to install them one by one, or with this part, both of them at the same time. Depends on whether you want iOS, Android, or both, or even Electron. So to add the native platforms to your Angular project, we need either Capacitor iOS or the Capacitor Android project. Once those two are installed, once again, we're using version 3 in this video, we can initialize or add those platforms. You only need to run this command one time. It is called npx cap add iOS, or in the other case, of course, npx cap add Android. And if you're using a source control like Git, this will most likely blow up your next commit, as this is adding a whole native project to your project. We can see now we got the iOS folder. Let's quickly also do this for Android just for fun. And we're gonna see we have another Android folder. So what this folder looks like is, well, it is basically a complete native project. So if you were an iOS or an Android developer, this would be the place where you live. Same for Android. Everything is included at this point. You can now use the native tooling to open this, or you can even make this a bit easier by running npx cap open iOS, for example. Also, once again, you can do the same for Android, npx cap open Android. This brings up Xcode. You perhaps haven't touched this if you're a web developer, or you might have need to set this up. So definitely go through the environment setup here from Capacitor if you never did something like this. So you're gonna have to install Cocoa Pods and some command line tools. You're gonna need to download Android Studio and install the latest Android SDK, as we're now really moving into native app development. And once you did this, you can find your application here. For testing on a real device, I think you still need a membership for the iOS program. For Android, I don't think it's required. But for iOS, I'm gonna have to select my team here. That's a different story about signing your applications. That's really a bit beyond this video. If you don't have a membership for the iOS program, you could also simply run it on one of the emulators. That would work the same, and you don't need anything. Let's also do the same for Android right now, just to show you how it will look like. So npx cap open Android. This should hopefully open Android Studio. The process might take a bit longer. At least in my case, Android Studio usually takes a lot of time to load the project and initialize it correctly. So we should be a bit faster with this one. So my iOS application is now deployed to my device, and I can even show you how this looks like. So where is my preview? Coming up somewhere. There we go. And what we see, we got the same Angular application that we've just seen right here inside a native application. We can use it. It's of course not mobile optimized. As you can see, the header is behind the status bar. We don't have any kind of native navigation in here, but anyway, it is a native application. And we could do the same now if Android is finished in like 10 hours to deploy this directly to my Google Pixel. So I'm gonna run this. I don't have any screen sharing for Android, but we can still see a preview. Now, this is, if you didn't recognize it, a kind of big step for a web developer, because you've now, with basically just installing, I think 3 or 4 packages, converted your web application, or not even converted, you're reusing your web application inside a mobile application. And you didn't have to touch your code at all. The only thing we got is a Capacitor configuration. We've set up to use the dist folder, and Capacitor will render your code. Capacitor does this by copying over your web assets into the native project. So, for example, right here, we can see everything we had in our dist folder right here. The index HTML, all the stuff that was included with Angular is now here in this folder. And whenever we make changes, we could now run npx cap copy, which would copy over the current web dist folder to our native projects, copying assets from Angular Capacitor to Android, whatever, to iOS, public, whatever. And then, boom, your application is updated. Now, on top of that, let's take a look now at native functionalities, because it's still a web application, but I want to show you the next cool thing about Capacitor, which is using native device functionalities. For this, we're going to install a new plugin from Capacitor called Camera. So Capacitor comes with a bunch of core plugins that you can check out here. This is the list of official core plugins. Yeah, if you want to build a mobile application, this is of course not everything. You need a lot more. For this, there's also the community plugins hub on GitHub, which shares a lot of cool plugins created by the community that can be used mostly the same like official plugins. But in our case, we're gonna do it with the Camera. If you install any kind of native package like the Camera, you also need to run npx cap sync, because what we did previously with cap copy was just copying over the web folder to our native project. But once you start using the Camera or other native functionality, the native projects need to update. They need to install some dependencies, like here. For iOS, we found the Capacitor Camera. Now it's called pod install using the iOS package manager, which is like Maven for Java or NPM for JavaScript. So this really needs to happen. Now we can finally, actually first time touching the code in here. So let's open our app component and let's change let's first of all add a little button and image to our app component. The default stuff in here is really interesting. All the inline styling, your page hopefully looks a bit better. I'll just put it in here. So I'm gonna put in a little button to call the function, and then hopefully we're gonna display an image down here. Therefore, let's set our image to empty string. And then let's implement capture image. To do this, we're gonna import the Capacitor Camera. And all calls to Capacitor plugins like the Camera or geolocation or something like that are by nature returning a promise. So we can call get photo, and as a result, we would get a promise. There we go, promise photo. I will just take the default code from the Capacitor page to get a photo. We can change the quality, allow editing, not too interesting here. The camera source is potentially interesting, as this could be directly the camera or the photo library or a prompt, because, well, why not? Also, you can specify the camera result type. That is really getting into more of Capacitor than we actually need to understand at this point. At this point, we just need to know then we can get a photo and the call will work on the web, on iOS, Android, just the same. Now, if we get an image, we will set this to our image, attaching the base 64 information up here, and then we hit save. Now, we could run the whole build process again. Do we want to do this? Yeah, let's do this for now. Okay, this will build it once again. In the meantime, we have to do two things, because if we check this out, you see for all the plugins a little documentation here. And you now need to get into the mindset of using a mobile application. And for iOS and also for Android, we need to set specific permissions in different files to access native device functionalities. So for iOS, we're gonna find this. If I close my node modules inside iOS app info.plist, this beautiful file. No, I don't want anything. Looks like this. It already defines a bunch of things, and what we're gonna add is the three keys: NS camera usage description, NS photo library add usage description, and NS photo library usage description. That really hurts my eyes to just read. Once we've done this, we also need to change the Android app source main Android manifest. That is the configuration file for Android. And we're gonna go to the bottom where we see the permissions section and simply add these two permissions. Once again, both of this is defined also on this page right here. And once we've done this, let's check it out. Let's run npx cap copy. I think copy should be enough for now. Copy is actually pretty fast. You will notice this. And then we should be able to run this on our device once again. So do I still have the preview? Yes, there we go. So there is our application. Let's hope. Yeah, we kind of got a button. It actually has shadows. Let's give it a try. Capture image. I'm gonna take a new picture of my recording. So a little recordingception. I'm gonna use that photo, and there we go. We have the native functionality included in our application. And I could now do the same with Android, so I could kill the application and then run it once again on my Android device. The result would be the same. We would have a capture image button and we were able to display that image. So if you want to integrate native functionality as well in your application that you build based on your Angular code, you can use now Capacitor plugins. Hello. You can use Capacitor plugins, and as you can see, take picture. Hopefully, yeah, that just shows green. But of course, I could now select an image, snap an image, and it will work completely the same on Android as well. Hope you can see this. Okay. What I wanted to show you as well is one more thing, because at this point you might ask yourself, well, building my application and then copying it over, that is really hard work, and I got ngserve, I can use a live preview, can I use something like that? And the answer is yes, of course you can. With Ionic, if you're using Ionic, there's directly a command to run live reload on a device. Now, since we've only included Capacitor in our Angular project, it is a bit different. So I'm going to show you what you need to do. First of all, do I still have... Yeah, it's still running. So I'm going to kill this, and I'm going to run this ngserve open -- host and setting the host to 000. You could also set the host to your IP, but I found that using 000 also works. What you need as well is your local IP now. So on a Mac, I can just run ipconfig get if address in 0. and I can copy this over. If you're on Windows, I think you can call ipconfig or something like that. Should work as well. Next step is head over to your capacitor config and add a new block server. And within this server block, we're gonna add a URL, and we're gonna make this HTTP my IP and the port of your Angular application. So that would be this. I should be able to, yes, exactly, access it from here as well. And we also need to use clear text true to enable this unsecure connection. Now, what this setting does is telling Capacitor to please load the application from this server. And we can now go ahead with npx cap copy, since we applied a little change in here. And then we deploy this application one more time to our device. Okay, there we go. Here's my application. So let's make this a bit smaller. And let's go somewhere to the app component or to the app component HTML and put in hello, my friend. I'm gonna hit save. And if we did everything right, we see we now got the live reload on the device as well. Basically same speed as our browser. So we can have live reload on the browser, on a device. I could also deploy this to Android. So you could have a full suite of devices with live reload in place. So you're basically working in lifetime, live speed on a mobile application, which is pretty amazing with both Ionic and Angular. Last thing I wanted to show you is how Ionic could help you in this, because right now you perhaps have your Angular application which looks great on the web. You're able to add Capacitor to access the geolocation, the camera, and more native functionalities, and you can even build the native iOS and Android applications. But an application on a mobile device is not just a website, really. There's a lot about custom styling. iOS and Android have different styling philosophies. There are different components that you use on the web that you just don't use inside a mobile application. Perhaps you also never used like a tab bar navigation inside the web. So Ionic is basically the toolkit, the UI toolkit on top of your application. Think of it a bit like Angular Material. So with Ionic, you get the nice UI. And I want to show you that even if you're coming from Angular, so the other direction, or React or Vue, you could still easily add Ionic to your project. And the way to do this would look like this. You would go ahead and install the according package for your framework. There's also a package for Vue, there's a package for React, and I think even in plain project you can use it because Ionic components are just web components. So they will work in any scenario. These projects are just the preferred way to use Ionic with one of those frameworks as there are special bindings. If we install Ionic, or if the installation at some point is finished, currently at version 5 or version 6, doesn't matter too much for this example, we can go ahead and add the Ionic module import to our app module and add Ionic module for root in here. Ionic also heavily relies on a lot of CSS. So if you want to use it correctly, you might have to bring in a bunch of these imports. So let's make this a bit bigger. We have the core CSS, we have a lot of helper CSS in here as well. If you just need a few things, you might not need everything. So you can give this a try. You will see which items are required and which not pretty soon. But overall, that's what you need. Also, Ionic has some default variables configured. You can find them. They have actually pretty cool color generator tool right here. Normally you have something like this defined in every Ionic application for all the default colors. So you could now generate your colors and copy that over to tweak it to your own needs as well. But we don't want to do this today. We just want to take a quick last look at whether Ionic is actually working in our application. So let's go to the app component one last time and put in a little Ionic component. This is a card, a very common mobile component. Card comes with a header, card comes with the content, and also has a button. So let's hit save, and we hopefully see, yeah, we don't see a lot because the shadows are never really displayed very good with my reflector application. So let's just try this one. Can I get a list of items pretty quickly up here? So now we don't see any item divider because it's a gray border. That really looks awful, like Ionic is horrible. Let's take a look at this on the web. So on the web, we see something like this. We see the card, and that first of all means that Ionic components are working now. Of course, we have all this custom styling here on this page, so therefore the card and the buttons don't really look good at all. I don't know if I could just put this like here. Would it render a bit better? Yeah, kinda a bit better. Not really on a mobile device yet, but these are the basic blocks of building an Ionic application. And if you want to enhance your Angular application, not only to have a web, to have a native mobile application, you could bring in Ionic as the UI toolkit for mobile applications as well. Quick note, if you also want to see a preview of this right here, just use the debugging tools. Set this, for example, to iPhone, and then you're going to see the iOS styling. Set this to an Android device and refresh, and you're going to see a different card, because at the root level, Ionic will apply a special class for material design for iOS to the CSS, and then all components get the custom iOS or Android styling automatically depending on which platform they ran. So to wrap it up at this point, I think we've finished our transition from an Angular web application to a mobile application. We only need Capacitor for this. We can have live reload with Capacitor, which is really a huge time saver. We can access the native device functionalities like the camera or anything that we can think of. And if we want to have more native-like or mobile-like components, we could also install the Ionic Core package or Ionic Angular, Ionic Vue, Ionic React to get access to all the Ionic components that you can of course find inside the Ionic documentation. And with that, you have successfully transformed your Angular web application into a native container with Capacitor. Alright, and that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this kind of different approach on using mostly Capacitor and a bit of Ionic in Angular applications. So you could use a React application, a Vue application, anything, and throw in Capacitor. And as you've seen, this is just about installing like 2-3 additional plugins, initializing Capacitor, and then you got your native project. The only thing you need to get comfortable with is later on editing native projects, the iOS project with Xcode and the Android one with Android Studio, which is perhaps not something you've done before if you're a traditional web developer, but it's actually not that scary. And if you just want to build your application, it's really not a lot you have to touch. Yes, the build process in the end to submit your application is a bit more complicated and you need to watch out for a few things. It's not like just hosting your application on your server with a traditional web application, but it's definitely something you can easily learn. Once again, check out the Ionic Academy if you now think, well, I really want to get more into Ionic and build native mobile applications, because that's what we do in there with a lot of videos and a great community and a lot of templates to really help you from the start to deploy your application to the app stores. As well, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and hit the subscribe button. There's a fresh Ionic video coming every week, and I will hopefully catch you once again next week. So stay tuned until then, and happy coding, Simon.